my name is Bola Lafe, and I run a small growing business called Opus Innovations. And it's a business that focuses on healthcare, innovative healthcare products. So we started with a sanitizing product, then we moved into a kind of a biodegradable wet wipe, and from that we moved into some diabetes type products. But the one thing that the Lord did put on my heart was that anything that I get involved with as a business has to tick 3 boxes. One box, it has to be good for people, other is animals, and the third is the planet. So what that's done for me is very much streamlined the things that I get involved in. Because unless they tick one of those boxes, I don't actually touch them. So that's kind of a nice, easy way to kind of focus my mind, because there's so many things that come across my desk that look exciting, and you think, yeah, that could make a load of money, and this can do that. This. But if it doesn't tick those boxes, for me, I don't actually touch it. So, which is great. But most of my career actually wasn't doing what I do now. I was in investment banking for 22 years. That's kind of what I did for a living. And that was based in London, New York, and Tokyo. So in that job kind of took me pretty much around the world. And it was a great job. But I left that in 2011 to set up Opus Innovations. Now, when I actually set that up, yes, I was a Christian. And yet I was a Christian because my parents were Christians. So I kind of got born into being a Christian. But I wasn't the kind of Christian that goes to church every week, and I don't really read my Bible every day. I may say the odd prayer here and there, but that's the extent to which kind of I was practicing being a Christian. So when I got out of the industry, it wasn't a case of, yes, the Lord had kind of directed me to set this business up. Not at all. It's just something that I felt that I wanted to do. And that's what I did. And I'll come into how that kind of is relevant a little bit later on. But I also, I'm a freeman of the Guild of Entrepreneurs, and I sit on their education committee. And again, what the Lord did there was actually quite remarkable, actually, because what I'm kind of focused on is how we teach the younger generation about how we protect this planet. Because if we don't teach the youngsters what to do, this planet will be doomed. If you really understood what's happening, it's quite incredible in terms of how much damage we're actually doing day by day. And it won't get fixed during our generation. It will be our kids and their kids and their kids that will actually fix the problem. So that's one of the things in my kind of spare time, if I have any, that I do, is to kind of get involved in that and see if we can kind of teach the kids. And what was interesting there is 9th of February, to be precise, I kind of felt the Lord saying to me, you've got to find it. I'll show you the way to get to the children. And it's not about writing about the technical side of plastic pollution and all that kind of stuff, because it'll just go through one ear and out the other. What it was is, how do you do it to get kids engaged? And what the Lord showed me was, like, a character. It's all about a character. So we created a character, and I wrote a 9,000 word book in less than 6 weeks. Without even, I'd get up 3, 4 in the morning and literally just sit there with my little pad and just write and write and write, not even thinking about what I was writing. And so now I've got the 2 books. There was a chapter book and a picture book, and so they're now out to 6 literary agents and 9 publishers. And again, I already know that the Lord has already found the publisher. I don't need to worry about it, because I know that me doing what I did wasn't off of my own back. It's something that the Lord, I felt, drove me to do. So, but it's all about faith. Now, I met Roger probably a couple of years ago, and really it was at church. So I kind of go to Kingdom Faith Church, the same church that Roger's at in Horsham. And on this particular day, Roger was actually introducing the book that Rob mentioned earlier on. How on earth did that happen? And I felt the Lord actually tell me that day at church, get a copy of this book. Now, I don't read books. And the reason I don't read books is because I read so many emails and I read so many contracts that I get sick of reading, to be frank. But I felt the Lord saying to me that day, get the book. So I did. I bought a copy of the book. It generated a series, and a huge series of light bulb moments. And this isn't to plug Roger's book at all, even though he has paid me. But anyway, not to, but it's more to share with you what it did for me and what it could do for you guys. And a lot of things that I'll talk about will just impact different people in different ways, because we all live different lives, we all live different people. And for me, as I say, there was a lot of issues that I was experiencing after I'd set the business up. And so I set that up in 2011. And I didn't know why lots of things weren't happening. Just the way the business was. I knew that I was capable of running a big business because the jobs that I was doing in the investment banks, we controlled tens of billions of dollars. And that was not millions, it was billions of dollars that we were actually controlling in the roles that I had. And so I knew that I kind of knew how to deal with the corporate world and how to deal, and there's me now struggling to run this small little company. So scratching my head thinking, but I know how to do this, I know how to do that. But it's not happening. And it was one issue after another. It didn't matter which way I turned, it was dead ends and blockages the whole way through. And I was completely baffled as to why. And Regent Rogers' book basically showed me a lot of different things that he was talking about in the book that had happened to him during his journey in the NHS. And I was thinking, yep, that's happening, yes, that's happening. And all of these different things that Roger was saying was happening were happening to me as well. So now, I could have gone back to the bank, and this is the interesting thing with this. The easy way out, actually, was for me to go back to the bank. And just to put this into perspective, what I was earning, and I'm not going to say what I was earning, but after all my outgoings every month, I still had tens of thousands of pounds just left in the account. So the easy thing for me would have been, you know what, give all of this up. It's easy just to give it up and just go back to work, because I could have gone back to work. I was at managing director level, which is the highest level you can get in investment banking. I was at that level. I'd been an MD for 6 years, so I was earning decent money. And the easy route out, despite all of these financial problems and issues, was to just go back. But it wasn't where the Lord was directing me. It was like, there's a reason you're doing what you're doing, and you've got to stick at it, even though it was painful. I could tell you that much, it was painful. But you're not earning a salary anymore, because when you start a new business, again, certainly doing what we were doing, you have no salary. So there was no salary coming in. And it meant that with all the commitments we had, because obviously from the banking days, I had lots of commitments that I'd kind of built up, kind of having that kind of salary and that kind of life, but those commitments were still there, no money coming in. And believe me, even a trip to Nando's became expensive and a bit of an experience. But for whatever reason, the Lord wanted me to carry on this journey. And in short, all the luxuries had to go, the cars had to go, sell the whole lot, and I had to keep selling equity in the business just to keep money coming in. So my equity percentage started dropping within the business as well. But again, the Lord was still keeping me on this path. You will continue. It's not for you to quit now and go back to the bank. So I didn't. But what was interesting though, and again, a lot of you guys who run business, you know it's not just about you. It's about you and your partners. If you've got partners, it's not just about one person. It's a family affair. And so not only was this affecting me, I've got a wife, I've got kids as well, and it was beginning to affect everything. But what was interesting was not once as well did my wife say to me, you should go back to the bank. She knew what her Gucci bags had all gone. The holidays in Maldives became holidays in Margate. Everything had changed. But not once did she kind of say, look, you just got to go back. And so thank God, and we carried on plowing through it. But we knew that there was a reason. Now, when I told my boss at the time that I was actually leaving and going to do this thing, he thought something had gone wrong upstairs, because he knew what I had and what the job was, and he was like, you're doing what? You're quitting all of this to do something that you have no idea where it's going to lead you to. I'm like, yep. So he obviously thought I had a mental malfunction, and no one could understand it. Nobody could really understand why I was doing what I was doing. But what I said to people, regardless of what it looks like, as far as I was concerned, it was God's plan. It was God's plan. I don't know where it's going to lead, why, but it was God's plan. And it's not for me to change God's plan, other than just to be obedient and actually go along on that journey, which is what I did. And it has been a journey of discovery for lots and lots and lots of reasons. So after I finished reading Roger's book, kind of going back to the Roger story, I kind of I met up with Roger one Sunday after church and spoke to him and shared with him all the things that are kind of going on in the business and how the business really isn't moving forward and can't get why. But what was interesting is it was not like the Lord had said to me that all these dead ends were there for no reason. What was happening was that there was lots of progress that was being made, but everything felt like it was behind a glass screen. I couldn't touch it. I could see it, but I couldn't touch anything. So contacts were being built, all sorts of things were happening that were all very positive, but I just could not touch them. And I shared all this with Roger, and Roger said to me, have you consecrated the business? Now, to be frank, at that point, I didn't know what consecrated meant. So I asked Roger embarrassingly, what do you actually mean by consecrated the business? And he explained. And if you don't know what it means basically means where you dedicate your business to God. You're basically saying, Lord, this is yours. You take care of it, and you be the owner of this business. And that's one thing I'd never done. I'd never actually thought that this was the Lord's work and it's the Lord's business, and I was running it off my own steam, thinking that I'm bright enough and experienced enough to be able to do this, so it's got to be able to work, but without actually saying to the Lord, look, this is your business, you direct me and guide me and actually own this business. And then Roger offered to actually come over and just pray over the business, to do a proper consecration and do that with me. So Roger came over. He prayed, I prayed, we both prayed together, and we properly consecrated the business to the Lord. And effectively what it meant was that I stepped back. I stepped down as being the executive chairman and the CEO to say, Lord, that's your role. You run the business, and then I'll be your assistant. And thank God he didn't drink lots of tea, because I'd have been running around like a headless chicken. But I stood back and said, that's it, I'm not running this business anymore, you are. And the difference from that point on was like heaven and earth. It really was. All that glass screen just shattered, and all the things that were sat behind it, all of a sudden I could touch them. I could feel, touch, and the business just kept on growing and growing and moving in a way that you almost couldn't believe it. And it was all because I was trying to run that business off my own steam, off my own back, without actually saying to the Lord, Lord, this is yours. You take this business and you do with it what you will, and I'll step back and just be obedient. And it really was something that you can't almost fathom the difference. And like that time, but this time last year, my biggest issues, to be honest with you guys, was how do we pay the staff? And how do we actually have money to actually carry on? How do we pay the salaries? How do we pay the rent and all that kind of stuff? Our biggest problem now is how do we manage the growth? And that's the biggest challenge I have now. How do we actually manage the growth? Because things are coming at us at a rate of knots that it's not in the natural, the way things are happening. But I can tell you, if I hadn't have done what I did, I would have still been where I was, which is behind the glass screen watching everything. But because I'd really obeyed and really said to the Lord, yeah, you take this, you run with it, it made all the difference. But you can't do it half-heartedly, and that's the key with this, is that you can't kind of say, I'll make the decisions when it suits me, and then you do the rest when you run into a problem. You've got to always be at a point where you've got to submit regardless, not just when things are good or things are bad. It's got to be all the time. Otherwise, you haven't got that wavelength, or you've got interference in that wavelength with the Lord. And I was sharing with a couple of you guys earlier on that even just of recent, I belong to a WhatsApp group with just some other dads from school and whatnot. But what that WhatsApp group's turned into is that, yes, it's great for communicating with each other when we pop out for drinks and whatnot. But some of the things that are being shared on that WhatsApp group are not appropriate. You wouldn't want your kids to see it and all that kind of stuff. And And I could see and feel again that that line of communication was getting kind of blurred because of all this stuff that I'm kind of seeing on this WhatsApp communication. And I could almost feel that things were slowing down again. And it's kind of weird and bizarre how this kind of happens. And out of the blue, I actually got a call from my brother who said, look, don't know why, but calling you because the Lord had shared something with him and said, look, I need to speak to you because you need to repent about something you're doing. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Nothing at all, because I know I live a clean life. And it's only after he put the phone down, I kind of thought, what could that be? And it's exactly what it was, is these WhatsApp videos and all this stuff that people are just sending around, that you're kind of watching and you're kind of having a laugh at them, but they're not appropriate videos. So now I've kind of thought, you know what, I'm not going to necessarily drop off the WhatsApp group because it's a useful group to be on. But what I've done is that I see the videos, I delete them. I don't look at them. As before, I kind of would, oh, that looks funny, I'll watch it. And you kind of see from the first screen that they're inappropriate. But you kind of think it's okay just to open them and have a laugh and delete. But it's not. I could feel that affecting the way things were with the business again. So now I've made the conscious decision that no, these videos are not appropriate. They're interfering with the wavelength I have with the Lord. I'm deleting them. And all of a sudden again, things have all started moving again. So my point in these stories is that when you have this journey with the Lord, it can't be hit and miss, and it can't be when it suits you, you kind of call on the Lord, and when it doesn't, you kind of go that way, then you kind of keep flitting between left and right. I think you have to really stay on that steadfast road and be true to yourself, but true to the Lord, because the Lord knows everything before we know it, and the Lord knows what's going on in our heads and in our hearts. But it's very easy to slip. And the one thing that I've learned, that those slippages do affect your life in its entirety. It's not whether it be how it affects your business, how it affects your day-to-day life, all that kind of stuff. It is affected by the way you live your life. And it certainly has. Every time I've kind of stood back from things and said to the Lord, it's yours, it makes a huge, huge, huge difference. And just to share with you guys again a few things that have happened, and I've shared 2 or 3 of them with you, but one was, we work a lot with the Japanese, so they have a special biotech product. Again, it's a product, it's a very special bacteria that can just eat through, I suppose the way to think about it is it's like a Yakult, but it's a Yakult that can eat through lots of very dangerous bacteria. You can use it in lots of different applications. And this technology, they got offered $30 million from the Chinese to actually buy this technology and to have it offer them. But they came to us and said, look, the guy who invented this Japanese professor has basically said they want us to have it. Now, we paid them $2,000 or £2,000 for the rights to a $30 million product. £2,000. And that's, again, these are not things that just happen, because from then it's just been one thing after another. We've got another situation again from Japan, where if you guys ever get the chance, just go and Google hydrogen water and see what hydrogen water is. And it's going to be one of the next biggest things to hit the world. It's effective against cancer, it's effective against Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes, you name it. It just even hangovers, believe it or not. It's effective against so many things. And if you read up on it, you realize that it's probably it's undervalued, and it's certainly definitely not a product that's really known out there. And again, we've been given the exclusive rights to the top hydrogen water product in Japan, which we haven't paid a penny for again. So what we're seeing is just lots and lots of favor. We've had 2 diabetes products that have come through to us again that we've got exclusively, which again, when you look back and think, how does all this stuff happen? This has all gone from a time where things were so difficult and we were struggling and nothing could happen and nothing was right, to a point that we're now struggling to keep up with what's actually coming through the door. And I know in my heart of hearts that it's all because of the journey that I'm on with the Lord. I've got a very, very clear open channel where I don't let anything interfere with it. And if things are interfering like they kind of were recently, I've killed it. and then the channel's back open again. So it's so important that you don't let that interference. It's easy done. In the world we live in, there's a lot of things that happen around our lives, and it's very easy to let that interference creep in. And sometimes you don't even realize that you're doing it, but it will creep in, and it will affect how you live that journey. And I think for me, what I kind of said here, the blessings have been unlocked in my life as a result of faith in the Lord, dedication to the Lord, conviction, confession and repentance. And for me, I got it wrong because I shut the Lord out of what was happening. It wasn't the other way around. The Lord never shuts us out of things. We shut him out. And all the time we shut him out, we can't make or get to where we want to get to in our lives because we've kind of almost not realized what we've actually done. So it's really, really important to keep that door open. And a lot of this stuff, which is quite interesting, I know we kind of all run our own businesses, but it doesn't just relate to people who run their own businesses. It relates to people in employment as well. You could be employed in a job, but how often do people kind of pray over their job as they're driving to work or going to work and sort of asking the Lord to bless their day and all that stuff? We don't. Even when I was in the bank, and if you question yourselves, how often do we really kind of even submit our jobs to the Lord, let alone our businesses? A lot of the time, that's our job, that's me. And you kind of almost, it's a personal thing that you do as a person, and almost forget that there's a connection between you and the Lord and your jobs. We don't do that. So I've learned a few things that I think it's worth me sharing with you guys. And these are the guidance that I had and how I kind of have lived my life now for the last couple of years. So I pray over my business at the start of every morning. So as I'm driving to work, I actually would pray to the Lord, Lord, today's yours, do with it what you will, and help guide the day and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of submit the business daily to the Lord, rather, because what happens as well, it's very easy to forget these things. It's not about consecrating your business once and just forgetting it, thinking, yeah, I've done it now, the Lord will just carry on blessing it. It doesn't work that way. You've got to continue, I think, to submit. So I do that every day. Often I find myself sometimes driving from home to work, and it's about a 10-15 minute drive, but I'm kind of praying over the business the whole way there. And I get to work and think, oh, whoops, I'm still praying. Oh, amen, got to go in and do some work. But it's nice when you can really connect that way, that you've kind of just said, yeah. And you really, otherwise you're listening to music on the radio or you're just doing whatever you're doing. But it's quite a time where you've got time to really sit in the car and kind of connect with the Lord. Not only is it about praying for the business, what I also do is I pray for my business partners, I pray for the staff, I pray for co-workers, co-directors. It's about that whole kind of, it's not just about us, it's about the collective. So I make sure I kind of pray over all the people that are connected to the business. And I submit my decision making to the Lord, which is kind of quite interesting, because sometimes I get emails and I get stuff that comes through, and it's easy to kind of think, yeah, I know the answer to this and I'm going to do it. But before I do, I always, again, just submit those big decisions to the Lord. Even sometimes I need to write an email, and it could be quite a tough email to write, but sometimes we find ourselves thinking, right, type away, scribble away. But I stand back from a lot of that now, and I kind of just say, right, okay, Lord, look, difficult situation, and I want you to guide me how to write this email, and you guide me how, with the right heart, to actually deal with this problem. So I submit all that kind of stuff. And when it comes to the whole issue of tithing, it's quite an interesting one as well, because again, I never believed in tithing. I always thought that's just a bit of a con. And I thought, I'd always search the Bible. I couldn't find anywhere in the Bible it says I've got to give anything. I always found an excuse not to actually give anything because I didn't think it was worth it. But now, again, it's unbelievable what you unlock when you do fulfill your duty of tithing and offerings. And there's two parts of the Bible which I share with you guys. Hebrews 13:5, which says, keep your lives free from the love of money. It's not about not having money, because you know what? We need money to survive. You take money out of society, society is dead. So money is the lifeblood of society. It's what I shared with someone a little while ago. If for 5 minutes you took money out of the world and said, you know what? There's no money for 5 minutes, even a minute, right? And said there's no money. imagine the chaos in the world where everybody's equal. There's no money. So money is a regulator. It's a world regulator that God's given us to regulate this world. Because you take it out, the world doesn't even exist. It doesn't work. It'd be complete carnage from one end of the earth to the other if you take money out. So it's not about not having money. It's about how your heart chases after it and what it means to you. It's the love of it that causes all the problems. It's not actually having it. And then in 1 Timothy 6 verse 10, it says exactly as it is. Remember, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And it all stems from all that. So even as a business now, you can't always take a business and say, well, I'm going to donate money from the business to church, because it doesn't kind of work that way. You can donate your own earnings and you can do what you like with them. But from a business, what we do now is we actually donate money from the business. Like, for example, one of the products we've just launched, which is biodegradable wet wipes, we donate 10% of the profits from those wipes to organizations around the world that help to clean up the ocean. So it's another way of being able to just give back, and to kind of the business is doing its tithing kind of thing, and the business is offering something back, rather than kind of have an excuse to say, well, you know what, we can't really give it as a business. You can. The businesses can give back, and that's the way we kind of do it. And if there's one thing that I would leave you with, and the thought is, if God is your co-driver, I'd suggest swapping seats. Just think about that one for a sec, because if we're driving that car, we don't know what's around the corners, and we don't know the best way, we don't know much about it. But if God's in that driving seat, you can be guaranteed of two things. One, you're going to get there on time or ahead of time, and two, you're not going to get lost on your way. And so for me, that's kind of what I kind of live by now. You know, I'm not co-driving anymore, I'm a passenger. Whereas before, it was always a case of, I'm the co-driver, and sometimes I'm like, God, you move over, you don't know what I need to move into the driver's seat. But now, I'm firmly sat as a passenger / backseat driver, and I have to just have that faith that the Lord's in control. He knows what I don't know. And a lot of the time, we as people think we know more, and we think we know best, and we kind of think, well, I know the answer to this, I know the way. But how can we when we don't know the future? Because God knows the future, God knows what's around those hidden corners. We don't. And so, but you have to have that kind of, it's the faith and the belief that you can relax. If you can't, then you've got a problem, because that's when you will keep jumping in, because you're not dedicating your business enough or your decisions enough to God. You have to really know that you can relax in the sense that it's being taken control of, because if you can't, I think it's just too difficult to be able to give those keys and give the driving seat to someone that you kind of don't really trust. So hopefully that's kind of given you guys a little bit about my journey. I'm sure everybody's got different journeys, but that's kind of where the Lord's taken me out of one career that was loads of money, loads of cars, loads of holidays, loads of all these great material things, but put me on a journey of discovery, which has been some hard lessons. But the one thing that I look back and I'm glad I've done it, is just I've been obedient to it. And now it's kind of, there was a reason. And now I'm able to fulfill that reason, teach the kids about sustainability, write books on sustainability, do all that kind of stuff, that now I can see the Lord's purpose. So thank you for listening. That was actually quite interesting, because my office manager is a Christian, and she knew, because she's the office manager, she does the bookkeeping as well, so she knew what the numbers were looking like, and the numbers were pretty bad. And I said to her that month, look, Laura, I can't actually pay you this month, we'll have to just wait a little bit longer. So let's pay the more junior staff, but I'll sort yours out afterwards. And she said, that's fine, don't worry about it. So, and I said, how come you're not really that panicky? Because I thought most people would have been looking for another job by now, but she hadn't. And she said to me, which to my, I shouldn't have been amazed, but she said to me, you know what? I'm not panicking because you're not panicking. And you're not panicking because you know that God's got this under control. And that was exactly her reaction. but she didn't panic because I wasn't kind of threatening. Because as much as I could see the numbers of what they were, I knew that I didn't have to panic about it. I knew that something was going to happen, and lo and behold, something happened. Everything was fine again, and we just moved on. And she's still with me till today. But and sometimes we have to be careful because our staff and our people can feel what we feel. And if you're completely relaxed and in tune with what you feel and you're relaxed that God's got the thing in control, if you ask and you believe, it's impossible not to receive. The problem that we have as human beings is we ask, but a lot of the time we don't actually believe we're going to receive it. And then we panic. But if you ask and you actually really in your heart know you're going to get it, what you've asked for, you will get it, and then you have no reason to panic. And I could have panicked with this business a half a dozen times since we've started it, but not once have I actually panicked. And every single time, something happens that just moves us on to another level. Every single time. Otherwise, this business should have fallen over a long time ago. Long time ago. We had a point where we shut the doors on this business for 2 years, where we were struggling with getting certain approvals from the health and safety executive, because when we brought the sanitizer in, it was the first time that anybody had brought this kind of sanitizer in. And it's a sanitizer that basically is water-based, but it's safe enough you could drink this stuff. But it kills everything from E. coli, salmonella, listeria, all these different superbugs, but it's as safe as drinking water. So they didn't know how to regulate it. So they basically said it's a pesticide. So if it became a pesticide, I can't sell this thing. So it took me 2 years fighting with the health and safety executive to get it approved. In the end, I had to issue a formal complaint against the health and safety executive. I had to get MPs involved, I got MEPs involved, and we beat them. But that was 2 years of the thing shut. But again, I still believed that somewhere in the back of all of this it will happen, and it does. And so the lessons I've learned throughout the whole journey is you have to really believe things are going to happen, and you've got to relax, knowing that it's actually done. Otherwise, if I'd have panicked in that situation that Roger was talking about, I'd have probably had no staff left. Because I'd have been screaming at everybody, panicking at everything, throwing things and whatnot. But I didn't. I had to just relax and say, you know what, God, you put me on this journey for a reason. I could be doing something very different. You don't want me to, so you know what, take care of it. That's exactly what happened. Well, at one point, we needed to move premises because we were growing at a rate that we needed more space. And the easiest way to do that was we had 2 units either side of the business. So we were Unit 12, Unit 11 and Unit 13 were both occupied. And they would have been the perfect units for us to expand into, naturally. And both of them had tenants in them. And I kind of prayed and said to the Lord, look, you know what's best for us. We need to expand. Ideally, left or right would be good, but you know what's best. And in no time, and this is, if you went on to the Brunel Centre, you'll see it now, both of those units came available, both of them, which they both had tenants in them. And they actually both came onto the market. And so we had the choice now of either of them. But what was interesting with that, we never took either of them because the Lord had something else in store. One day, well, probably 4 or 5 months ago, I was just flicking through my emails and an email came into my inbox that I would never, ever ordinarily look at. It's one of these kind of cold call-y type emails. And I thought, but something, the Lord almost said, just open that email. So I opened it. And it was from a company called DNA, who were based in Crawley where we are as well. And they were offering a service that basically we could, it was a palletized fulfillment and storage service, which I would never have opened that email, but I opened it, kind of looked into it and thought, you know, there's a message in here somewhere. And I followed it through, and believe it or not, we've ended up doing a deal with that company instead, which has saved us 40 grand a year on the rent. So we would have paid 50 grand a year if we'd have taken any of those 2 units either side. But with this particular deal that we've done with them, because the way it's structured, it cost me 9 grand a year. So not only did the Lord just kind of show you, like, look, if you believe, see what can happen when you can believe that unit came available, that unit came available. In fact, the answer was somewhere else, which is cheaper than both of them anyway. So it's amazing what you can unlock in your lives and in your businesses when you really properly It's not you can't play lip service to it, and that's the thing, because you'd only be kidding yourself. God knows our hearts and knows our words and all the rest of it, but you have to really, really deep down believe. When you've got that channel open, you can hear lots of different ways, lots of different times. But what I've been finding recently, and again, I will go back to this point of these email, these things that were happening on WhatsApp. I felt then that almost like the Lord wasn't talking to me anymore. Because I'd almost done I was my own worst enemy at that point, because I've been the one that had blocked the communication channel. It's not like the Lord had moved to one side. It's like, well, no, you've introduced interference, and that's why you're not hearing. It's not because I've stopped talking to you, it's because you've distanced yourself. And so since that, I've kind of decided, okay, I'm just deleting these little messages and whatnot. Everything's kind of come back and I can hear things. Now, for me, the bizarre place that I get the Lord talk to me is actually just when I'm getting ready for work in the shower in the mornings. And it's like, I go into the shower and I don't even think about anything. I just have a shower and I get message upon message upon message. Sometimes it's literally just in the car. I don't think there's any particular place that the Lord tends to kind of, it depends where you are in your life at that particular point. But I tend to definitely find that when I'm in the shower in the morning, it's almost like that's my time with God. And it seems to be where He's chosen to have my time, is when I'm the water tipping on my head and all that kind of stuff. And I just get messages that, yeah, bizarre messages as well, but things that I think, well, even down to the books that I've written. I've just written a poem, and the poem is called A Turtle's Cry. And again, it's all about how the turtles and the animals are suffering in the waters. But even the words that came to that, I couldn't write that poem again now. If you'd said to me, sit down and write it now, I couldn't. Because I felt that the words that were given to me and how it was written was just through the Lord. And that was early in the mornings. I tend to find 3, 4 o'clock in the mornings, I do get up early, not all the time, but 3, 4 o'clock in the mornings, I've got very clear space as well. And when I wrote the books and the poem, that's when I did it. Pretty much when I got up, it was 3 to 5 in the mornings, that there was a time that I could feel the Lord guiding me. Now, what was interesting about these 2 books, and I'd love to show you guys the manuscript so you see what I mean. I wrote just over 9,000 words, and hardly any of the pages has got any crossings out in it. You would have thought that when you write that much, that scrub that, literally it's almost clean all the way through. Because I wasn't writing that from just me writing it. I felt the Lord telling me what to write. And I could just write this thing and write. Hardly anything has got a line through it. Which is kind of... So the Lord does talk to us, but the problem is for a lot of us, we don't give Him the chance to. As much as it's hard to admit, we close those doors ourselves, sometimes without actually realizing it. It's not like we do it on purpose, but I think how we live our lives affects the way that the Lord can actually get to us. And a lot of us don't realize that as much as we probably could and should. But when you do change that dynamic, you'd be surprised how much also changes in your lives because you've opened the door. I got married back in 2004, and I met my wife in Japan. That was when I was working and living out in Japan. We got married in a Japanese temple, all that kind of stuff. I said my vows in Japanese, which I didn't understand a word of what I said, so I just read them off a bit of paper. But what was interesting throughout our marriage, now my wife was a Buddhist, I was a Christian, so we never had the same religion. Obviously the kids are kind of mixed religions. Whenever we did the forms of what religion are the kids, is like always put Christian first and put Buddhist last. But what was interesting is that we never had that meeting of minds in terms of our religious relationship, because we obviously had 2 different religions. So she didn't believe in Christ and didn't believe in God. The Buddhists believe in Buddha. And for our whole relationship, we struggled in terms of trying to really come together as one, especially with the kids and us as a couple. And it was only, and it got to the point that things were really, really difficult, and I've kind of given this testimony at church as well. But it was only to the point, at the point that we actually, in an interesting way, again, it's back to the same point of consecration. We'd never consecrated our marriage. We'd never given our marriage over to God. One, in the beginning because she wasn't a Christian, but at the point that she did become a Christian and we consecrated our marriage, it was the biggest, best thing we ever did. It's what saved our marriage, completely saved it, because it was, as far as we were both concerned, it was done. And it's only at the point that we both said, right, okay, you know what, the reason it's done is because I was trying to do what I felt was right. I was doing it from my own perspective, not from God, and she was doing it from her perspective. You've got two humans using your natural powers to try and solve a problem. But neither of us actually said, you know what, let's stand back from this, let's pray together, let's hand our marriage over to God, and you know what, if God can do all these things in other ways, He can do this with our marriage. And now we couldn't have a better marriage. And it's the same thing, again, it's all this lesson about the business, it applies to so many aspects of our lives that sometimes we forget that you really have to hand over, and we did in that circumstance, and it literally changed everything. I couldn't, at that point, I felt that I kind of couldn't have married someone that was so far away from what I wanted, but now I wouldn't actually change my wife, because we're so together on that journey. And I think when you're together on a journey with God, whether you're doing it on your own as a business or in your personal married lives, it does make a huge, huge difference. And so for me, these are not all coincidences. You could look at one thing or another, and you can say, oh, it's coincidence, it's coincidence. But there's no coincidence in there at all, because every time we've done what we need to do, it happens every time. So even with the kids, every morning, before the kids leave home and we go out the door, the four of us will hold hands and we'll pray together, and we'll just kind of submit ourselves to the Lord every single day. It's what we do as a family, and how we've taught them now. We want them to grow up. When they get their kids, you know what, do the same with your kids. Don't ever take the Lord for granted, because it's so easy. We live a fast-paced life, and it's so easy to actually just forget all these small things that make such a huge difference, because life is running at that kind of speed, and we think we don't have time. And the one thing that I felt the Lord say to me as well was that it was a tithing of my time, because I really am so busy with all the different things I'm doing. But what I felt the Lord saying to me is like, you know what, before you get out that door, every morning you need to at least dedicate some time to me. Because it's so easy to get up and just think, you know, I'm too busy, I'll do this later on. But later on never happens, because we're all busy and we've got so much stuff going on. But now what I do every single morning, I get up, before I leave the house, I at least read a verse and a chapter of the Bible. That's kind of, and it's been so difficult. So it's like probably the hardest thing I have to do every day. Is to do, because it's making that time, it's forcing yourself to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do, because you kind of think, I'm too busy, I'm too this, I'm too that, and we've got this going on. But when you really put your mind to it and you really kind of say, you submit, there's nothing you can't do. So it's now part of the way I live. I get up and I know that before I leave the house, you know, I have to have read my verse and my chapter every single morning. Because it's my way of kind of just saying, Lord, okay, look, before I start my day, I'm giving some time back to you. It's kind of tithing your time, as opposed to, it's not just about money. It's about tithing who you are and your time to God as well. And that's probably harder for people than sometimes giving the money, because where did you get the time from? When you're already busy anyway, and then you've got to make this extra time to read the Bible and whatnot. What we can do is, the way we run the business, we can also scale up with temps as well. So the good thing with temps is that it can be quick, and if they don't work out, you can shift them around. So we do a fair bit with temps. We also outsource a lot, so we can use third-party companies as well. But what that has triggered in my mind is something that, again, I still don't know how this happened, but I'll share this story because you'll see what this means, right? So I met this guy back in 2016, and I interviewed this guy for a job at the time. It was going to be an office management role. And I interviewed him, and I couldn't wait to get this guy out of my office. It annoyed me so much that I really had to think, you know what, you're definitely not getting the job, right? And so that never happened, never thought any more of it. And I've actually told this guy this as well, so I don't mind this being on camera. Because then what happened, probably about December time, I needed to hire a business development manager. And I felt the Lord saying to me, I've sent you the person. And it happened to be this guy again. And I was like, you can't be, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way that it can be this particular chap. And I said to the Lord, look, I don't think it is right for the business. I've already kind of interviewed him and blah, blah, blah. But what was interesting, about 2 months beforehand, he'd rang the office bell because he was in the area and just wanted to pop in and say hello. So it's like, okay, this is about 2 years after I'd met him for the interview, and he pops by, says hello, and off he goes again. But that was the person that the Lord had said, that's who you need to hire. Now, so I hired the guy who was obedient. Again, this is where you've got to be really, otherwise you'd be questioning the Lord. If you have that kind of relationship, then something's wrong, because you shouldn't be a point that you're hearing something from and then you question it. So I didn't question it, I hired him. So I hired him, and we've had nothing but trouble. Right? I've had to, and I thought, okay, there's something that's not quite going right here. But what's really interesting, where this leads to actually, really, really, really interesting, because at that point I was like, okay, I've done what the Lord told me to do. I've been obedient, and it's happened exactly what I thought was going to happen has happened. I've got problems with him, right? And so I've had to pull it. How many times has he been in my office? More than I'd like to kind of count, but anyway. So the first issue was a whole load of issues. I said, okay, you've got to change this, you've got to change that. It's not happening. Everybody around you is getting peed off and blah, 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 blah. You've got to change, otherwise it's not going to work out. Okay, I changed. I didn't realize all this. Because the next set of issues happen. Pull him in the office again. This has happened, blah, blah, blah. And it's continued like this. And I've had to ask the Lord, look, why did you send this guy to me? Because it's like, because I knew this was going to happen. Right, but this is really bizarre what happens next. And then, so the last set of discussions with him was just last week, and this is particularly uncomfortable discussions. I don't think I've ever had to have with anyone before, but anyway, I had to have them, and told him that unless these things change, you're done. But at the same time, I can't fire you because the Lord friggin' put you here. So he didn't know that, so I could wing it a little bit. But what transpired in the end is that no one's ever told him about all these different things. And the Lord's been using me to basically shape him and really turn him into something that he could be, because he's very bright. He's very capable. I've never met anyone as good on the phone. He talks to people on the phone that are complete strangers, and you'd think he'd known them for a year. And it's only when he says, oh yeah, it's Peter from Opus Innovations. You mean you didn't know them? I said, no, first, but you'd hear the conversations. So as a salesperson, he's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But what I've now, and so the message is, in the end, I've figured what's happening here, is that the Lord has sent him to me to basically help him in his career and to shape him as a person. And I've told him, the great thing is he's a Christian, so I was able to share this with him last week. I said to him, if it wasn't because of him up there, you'd have been gone a long time ago. But you know what? The Lord has sent you here for a reason, and the reason is you needed some work done. And it's been my job to help you do that work and get you. So, but now he's kind of settled in, but I could have easily have been, you know, not for us, wrong, but again, that would have been me questioning the Lord's authority and questioning what had been sent. So it's, whenever I hire people as well, I will pray over that person. And again, most of the time when I hire people, even with this guy, and in fact, twice it's happened now actually with my office manager, and again, these people are Christians, so they know this. When I prayed over that job, And I said, look, Lord, I need someone that can really do this job. We're struggling where we are right now, and we need someone that's not going to be a burden, that will help us. And again, he'd said to me, the person that I send you will be a Christian. And I thought, well, how do I know that? I'm not exactly going to ask someone in the interview, you're a Christian. But so the lady turns up for the interview, massive big crucifix. You got the job, right? Just come in, when do you want to start? But the same thing with this other chap that I've just been telling you about. I actually asked the Lord again, look, how will I know, because I've had a few people that applied for that business development, how will I know when I've got the right person? But the interesting thing again with that one, he said to me, it was the same thing, the person will be a Christian. Now, I was on the phone with this chap talking to him, and again, I couldn't ask the question. And I've just thought, how do I find out with this phone interview if you are or not without being politically incorrect? And then it just so happened during the conversation, he said to me, oh, his father was a minister at church for this, that, and the other. And I go, okay, great. So I said to him, so are you in the church as well? They go, yeah, I'm the youth minister for our current church. And so again, that was easy. And so I do pray over the people that I hire, and I pray for the Lord to show me and send me the right people. I don't just leave it to chance. And I think that's a really important thing to do, because we don't know people from the next person. We can't tell. The Lord does, we don't. So a lot of the time, even when you look at people's CVs, the CVs and who they are can be completely different. Completely different. I hired one person that on her CV it said that she collated all the reports and did all the financial reporting for all the directors, so I hired her. Little did I know that numbers made her cry, literally. And I said to her when the job didn't work out, I said, why did you put that on your CV that you collated all and did all the financial? She said, yeah, I photocopied And that's what she'd done. She didn't do numbers, but she made out that she was like the financial this, that, and the other until I gave her number work to do. So CVs are one thing, interviews are another, but you know what? The Lord, no one can fool the Lord or trick the Lord. So if the Lord's sending you people, or you're praying for people and the Lord sending you, then you know you can't go wrong. And for me, that's how I get it right, by just relying on not my own judgment anymore. Yeah, financial was probably the hardest, because I think when you're starting a business from scratch, you're obviously starting the business for it to make money. At the end of the day, a lot of people don't start businesses for any other reason. You're trying to make a living and whatnot. But when you're in a position where you've got literally nothing coming in, and you're having to then shut the business for 2 years, and then keep diluting your equity to keep it going, to bring money in, the challenge at that point is, do we just carry on, or do you throw the towel in, or do you carry on? And that was the biggest decision that I had to make, is where do we go with the whole thing? And I think it's one of the hardest things for people starting businesses, is knowing when to throw the towel in, or when to keep throwing good money after bad. And I think that was probably the hardest thing. But because I think the Lord had me covered, even though I wasn't a proper practicing Christian at that time, but I knew that the Lord had put me on that journey for a reason, and that although things were difficult and hard, that we just had to just keep going on, and just keep plowing on through it. But financially it was hard, very, very tough. So I think that was probably the biggest hurdle. So it's definitely important to know when to throw the towel in. And I've seen so many people that start businesses and they just carry on. They put their houses on the line, they put this on the line. So at what point do you stop? You can't just keep going just because you've started a business and you've got a passion about something. Sometimes it's not the right thing. You just got to know when to kill it.